course, just yesterday when we found out it follows it, Facebook announced that it removed dozens of fake accounts after uncovering a coordinated effort aimed at interfering in our elections. You're watching Outnumbered. I'm Harris Faulkner. Here today, Melissa Francis, Republican strategist and senior fellow for the Independent Women's Voice, waving kindly. Lisa Booth, former deputy spokesperson for the Department of State, Fox News analyst and host of Benson and Harf. Will she wave? I don't know. Marie Harf herself.
No wave.
Also with us today in the center seat, Outnumbered, Fox Business anchor David Asman, the on-television spouse of the woman next to me. I said on television.
Okay,
I said on television.
I did wear the suit that Melissa likes the best today.
It's a
just
nice
for
suit.
her.
Melissa has good taste.
She does.
And to your spouses, respectively, at home, hi.
Absolutely.
Thank you
Absolutely.
for watching.
Thanks.
Let's get to the news. Facebook says more than 290,000 users followed those fake accounts, which were involved in, quote, coordinated, inauthentic behavior. But the investigation is still in its early stages, and we are told it is unclear exactly who was behind the operation. Today, Senate lawmakers hearing from social media experts on how to stop foreign actors from using social media to interfere in our elections. Senate Intelligence Chairman Richard Burr says it's not about relitigating the 2016 election, thank goodness, but about the security of our elections moving forward. Watch it.
This isn't about who won or who lost. This is about national security. This is about corporate responsibility. And this is about the deliberate and multifaceted manipulation of the American people by agents of a foreign hostile government.
Vice President Mike Pence yesterday blamed the Obama administration for the current cyber crisis.
In the face of these threats, the American people demand and deserve the strongest possible defense. Sadly, previous administrations have let the American people down when it came to cyber defense. At the outset of this administration, it became clear from early on, in a very real sense, we inherited a cyber crisis. The last administration all but neglected cybersecurity, even though the digital threats were growing more numerous and more dangerous by the day. Well, make no mistake about it. Those days are over.
Woo! That lit things on fire. Former Obama Director of National Intelligence James Clapper is hitting back saying no steps were taken. Watch.
Last administration did a lot to enhance cybersecurity, notably having someone in the White House responsible for cybersecurity coordination across the government, which we don't have now. To President Obama's credit, he did directly and pointedly confront Vladimir Putin about their interference.
Meanwhile, ranking Senate Intel Democrat Mark Warner announced that senior executives from Facebook, Twitter, and Google will testify before the panel September 5th. This seems like, David, there is a ratcheting up of purpose and stakes here.
There is. I don't like the stakes involved in the blame game that much because there's enough blame to go around.
But we have to move forward.
Everybody's dropping the ball. What hasn't changed, though, is what Russia's been doing. I used to cover the old Soviet Union in the late 1980s.
It hasn't specified that it was Russia, but I hear you saying it.
It sounds like their MO. It sounds very much like their MO. But the fact is that for decades, and of course we got to realize Vladimir Putin is a part of the old Soviet Union. He's a KGB guy at heart. They've been trying to sow dissent in the United States ever since Stalin was in power, and even before that. They continue to do that. It's just the method of delivery has changed, and that's what they're focusing on now. There hasn't been enough done in the past. There probably isn't being done enough now, but I don't think it's ever going to stop.
You know, Lisa, Senator Lindsey Graham says that he is working on introducing a Russia, quote unquote, sanctions bill from hell.
Mm-hmm. Go for it. I mean, President Trump's been really tough on Russia, as we should. So I have absolutely no problem with continuing to sanction Russia and to be tough on them. But I do think, of course, we have to take cybersecurity issues seriously. We even saw China hack OPM, and we should absolutely make sure the United States institutions are protected from foreign interference, whatever it is. But I think that this intense focus on the social media is overblown. You look at the impressions from Facebook alone, 56% of them happened after the election. The majority of ads didn't mention the United States election. You look at things like even $2,000 spent in Wisconsin is a complete joke. I've mentioned this before, but Jeb Bush spent I think it was almost $3,000 per voter in the state of Iowa alone in the Republican primary. And I think Facebook has a vested interest in trying to get out in front of this in any way they can because they've taken a huge financial hit recently.
They do have an incentive, and I'm not totally confident that they're doing everything they could and should. In fact, I deleted my account before it came out in the air today. And if it's still there, it's only because
was it tough to do? It used to be hard to do.
Well, I hope it went through all the steps and I did it properly.
Come back,
they do.
No, I didn't deactivate. I attempted to completely delete it because I just think this is very nefarious. And especially when you read down in here, trying to incite violence.
Yes.
I mean, this is really serious. Yes. This is really bad for our democracy. It's really bad for our families, our lives. I mean, I deleted my account. That's that. I'm out of Facebook.
With you and David
on
the couch, I want to ask about, because you say you don't know if Facebook is basically going to get it right. Why can't they get it right? And is this on them or just the bad actors outside?
It's like trying to delete anything on the internet. The internet
no, I mean the process. Like this is a further journey for them.
Because it's not necessarily always in their economic interest to do everything that they would need to do. I mean, there are some things, yes, they want to restore faith so that people, like I just did, don't delete their account.
Right.
So that makes sense. But at the same time, it's what drives their revenue. Having more people on there, having more interaction, selling of the ads, that drives their revenue. So they sort of have a mixed incentive
here. And it's like playing whack-a-mole. I mean, they take down 32 accounts and 300 pop up because the Internet Research Agency, which is behind at least some of these that they deleted, that's a Russian internet meddling firm, basically. They are very good at this, and they have people who can do this in their sleep. So they delete some, and then hundreds more pop up. It's literally like whack-a-mole. And I think Facebook is going through a serious internal crisis about how to handle this issue because they're committed to free speech. They're committed to people being able to use their platform in many ways.
But Twitter and others, I mean, I'm really coming at this with...
This is a really tough problem.
With a huge question mark because Twitter and others have challenges the same way, I would imagine. These are all, but look at what Twitter did a couple of weeks ago. I mean, they went on the egghead alert. You know, they were starting to look at those accounts that visibly were not real or you know, bots or whatever, and they were scrubbing them, and people were complaining that they were losing followers.
By the way,
they weren't real anyway.
Can we just focus for a second on the editorial here? What it was that Russia was trying to do, specifically the groups that it was trying to get under their sphere of influence. It turns out that this call for the end of ICE was a part very much interested the Russians or whoever is behind this thing because they were involved with a group called Stop Ripping Families Apart, Take Over ICE Headquarters. They tried to arrange a rally in front of the Department of Homeland Security, and in fact a total of 131 people marked themselves as having attended the June 27th rally outside of ICE's headquarters. So it's very interesting that the Soviet Union has always tried, whether it's on the right or in this case the left, they're always trying to find useful idiots in the West. That's the term that Lenin used. Useful idiots here in the United States or in Europe to carry over on their cause.
But part of the problem, I mean, you have 2 billion Facebook users each month, right? I mean, you could probably find
Well, they did. I don't know if they're picking up like that because they were saying that they're losing followers.
But you could find anyone doing just about anything with that many people worldwide using Facebook, and Facebook has not even been able to tie some of these accounts to Russians either. So I mean,
many of them they have, Lisa.
Well, sure, and I have no problem with taking those people down, but I'm just saying there's 2 billion
people who want to interfere in a democratic process.
Exactly.
And don't miss what David just pointed to, though. What are they doing? They're dividing us along cultural and racial lines.
Absolutely.
And why do they do that? Because they know that we will fight in the streets before we will ever love on each other enough to know that the enemy is outside.
Harris is right, and that's why
more violent too.
Harris is right. Melissa, you're absolutely right. They're trying to get more violent. This is really bad for our democracy, and Facebook really has to take a look at what they want their business to be used for.
And we have to take a look at what what we want to be like as a country, because we don't have to let them
the bottom line
divide
is,
us.
folks,
Bingo,
I'm afraid to say
Absolutely.
you cannot,
100% agree with you.
cannot outlaw useful idiots. They were here in the early part of the 20th century. They're going to be here in the latter part of the 21st
So delete your
century.
Facebook account.
Or maybe
there you go.
or your Twitter account.
That was my solution.
Right. And
I'm out.
Lisa, you and I are saying the same thing.
Time for some self-reflection, America.
Yeah, get along.
Maybe be nicer to people.
It'll be
All right.
harder to divide us.
Another Fox News alert for you right now. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, fellow Democrats and political activists holding a rally calling for the Senate to block the nomination of President Trump's Supreme Court pick, Brett Kavanaugh. Yesterday, Senator Schumer repeated his demands for the release of all documents related to Kavanaugh's time working in the Bush White House. That request that would reportedly surpass 1 million documents. Watch.
The Senate must have the records spanning Judge Kavanaugh's career as a public servant. What are they hiding? Why is there such an effort not to have the documents come forward when that has been the bipartisan precedent of this body?
The Democrat leader may be putting red state Democratic senators in a tough spot. Despite the pressure, Senator Joe Manchin met with Kavanaugh. Senators Heidi Heitkamp and Joe Donnelly are planning on meetings as well. Republican Senate Majority Whip John Cornyn says Senator Schumer is just trying to delay. Watch.
Now we are engaged in what I would call the great paper chase. It leaves me with I think the inescapable conclusion that this is really all about foot dragging and delay. They know that they can't attack him based on qualifications, based on his character, and now it's all about paper and delay and obstruction.
Interesting stuff. Marie, do you think that this is the best move for Democrats?
I'm sort of in the middle here because I do think that the Senate has a right to advise and consent on Supreme Court nominees, and any paper out there in his history that is directly relevant to how he would do his job is something the Senate should have. And I think that's a fair ask to make. Whether those documents are part of when he worked at the White House or not, I don't know. Some of those might not be relevant. I have also argued that Democrats, I'm sorry to say, guys, we're going to lose this fight. He's probably going to be confirmed. And if that's the case, I do not think the Democratic Party should draw this out any closer to the midterms, because I think all it does is fire up Republicans. And if we're going to lose anyways, let's lose quickly and move on to talking about all the issues we actually want to talk about on the campaign trail. I'm not sure the Democrats in the Senate are actually listening to me on this, but that's sort of where my analysis is at the moment.
I agree with you.
Yeah,
look at that. Wait, this Fox News alert.
Actually, we are having a moment on the couch. Maria Hart and I agree that we're in unison. Yeah, there you go, my friend.
You just got to pull back. Brett Kavanaugh is nowhere near as conservative as Antonin Scalia was. Antonin Scalia was the most conservative justice, I think, in my lifetime to be in the court. You know what he was confirmed by? 98-0 by the U.S. Senate. 98-0 for a guy who was much more conservative than Brett Kavanaugh. So what are the Democrats complaining about?
So a different political climate because, disagreeing with the opposite side of the aisle didn't mean that you had to hate them. There is a lot of mean-spiritedness now on Capitol Hill, and I'm not saying everybody, but there's enough of that diseased thinking that it just gets everybody saying, no, I'm going to retreat to my corner. Now, what Marie said is so interesting, because not only does this fight hurt the Democrats as it gets closer to the midterms, it hurts everybody because people will just decide not to vote. And to me, that is the greatest crime and the greatest heartbreak in all of this. No matter whom you vote for, there are people who gave it all so that we could go to the polls. I mean, suffrage, gave life. Just get to the polls and believe that your vote counts. When you see both sides like this, it's over an issue that, as you said, is settled.
It used to be about qualifications, whether somebody was qualified or not on the basis of whether they were on the left or the right. It was just based on qualifications, and it is no longer based on qualifications. It's based on these abstract ideologies.
I think we mentioned that Capitol Hill rally that's going on right now. We should probably tell everybody.
Well, I think we said it in the beginning that this is that rally that is going on and why we're doing this segment. I mean, they're right there talking about Brett Kavanaugh and not wanting to have him.
And I think Merrick Garland would feel like things have been.
But the White House has released. My understanding is the White House has released more documents from Kavanaugh's executive branch experience than any other Supreme Court nominee before. So they have been transparent in putting these documents out. Obviously, Senator Schumer his interest is trying to do whatever he can to throw it out there, try to slow the process.
I just don't think that's smart.
But I agree with Marie. Well, we had her moment earlier, which was lovely.
It was lovely.
And also, we look at some of the Democrats that are sitting down with Kavanaugh. These are also the individuals who voted for Neil Gorsuch. Rand Paul's already on board. This is happening, folks. As Marie pointed out, we are going to have a Supreme Court Justice Kavanaugh.
I don't like that it's happening.
Marie may not like it, but it's happening, people.
Well,
so
I mean, it is interesting. It is interesting and sad that it has become completely political. And like you said, Merrick Garland. And before that, I mean, it has now come down to, are you going to support my positions or not as a Supreme Court justice? And that's, as you said at the beginning, that's not what the Supreme Court was supposed to, and we resisted it.
Democrats in red states have to bend to the reality that they.
Well, Joe Manchin
and there are others as well, Heidi Heitkamp, et cetera. So that there will be, I think, just a handful of Democrats. But now that you have Rand Paul, there's virtually no opposition. We don't know what will happen with John McCain, but there's virtually no opposition among Republicans.
All right, President Trump still calling on Congress to fund his border wall or face a government shutdown. Is the president doing a good job of banging the drum on an issue important to his base? Or could his threat backfire with less than 100 days to go before the midterms? Plus, President Trump could soon up the ante in the trade battle with China as we learn the White House is considering new tariffs on Beijing. So will the president's plan to narrow the trade deficit work? We'll discuss that coming up.
This has been too many years of abuse. $500 billion a year. $500 billion. We've helped rebuild China. We can't do that anymore.
At Safe Flight Auto Glass.
Democrat Party, they want to abolish ICE. In other words, they want to let MS-13 rule our country. That's not going to happen. Every day, the brave men and women of ICE are liberating communities and towns from savage gangs like MS-13 that are occupying our country like another nation would. We want maximum border security and respect for our heroes, ICE, Border Patrol, and law enforcement.
President Trump there ripping Democrats over immigration during his rally in Florida. This after he threatened to shut down the government if Democrats in Congress refused to support funding for the border wall and other immigration proposals. The president tweeted, "I don't care what the political ramifications are. Our immigration laws and border security have been a complete and total disaster for decades, and there is no way that the Democrats will allow it to be fixed without a government shutdown. Border security is national security, and national security is the long-term viability of our country. A government shutdown is a very small price to pay for a safe and prosperous America!" Exclamation point, as he likes to use those. Yesterday, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell said he supports the president's border wall, but he does not want to see a shutdown.
I support what the president's trying to do on the wall. Most of my members do as well. And we're trying to go through a normal appropriations process that prevents a big event at the end of the fiscal year, which has become all too common around here.
He and the House Speaker, and the House, by the way, feel this way. Democratic Senate Leader Chuck Schumer says he's working with Republicans and just wants the president to butt out.
We're making very good progress. The fly in the ointment here, of course, is the president, who keeps brandishing his sword and threatening.
The president is set to meet with Republican senators in the Oval Office today, and the subject of immigration is sure to come up again. So you have Paul Ryan, Speaker of the House, Mitch McConnell on the Republican side, and Democrats saying no to shutdown. Is this swamp-tastic behavior, or should the president hold off until after the midterm elections?
It is swamp-tastic behavior. But the fact is that Schumer was blamed for the last shutdown. Remember, most Americans think Schumer was
shutdown. Yeah.
There are two sides of the shutdown thing. There's the political side, and then there's the economic side. I went back economically, and look, markets do pretty well in government partial partial government shutdowns. Markets don't do so badly, particularly if the economy is doing well. And as we know, the economy is booming right now. We just had a wage figure of increase of 2.8%. We haven't had an increase like that in 10 years. So the economy is booming. Markets are doing okay. I think the economy, politically, as I said, Schumer was blamed for the last one. In 2013, there was a shutdown that Republicans were blamed for, but it didn't hurt them in the 2014 midterms. So who knows?
Maria, I want to go to you on this, because before, when we were talking about previous issues, you said it really doesn't behoove us to kind of argue about these things. Let's just get through it. Do you feel the same way about the shutdown?
Well, I think that there are actually a lot of Republicans in Congress who do not want to shut the government down 5 weeks before a midterm, particularly in the House, over funding for a border wall that, as their constituents remind them, Donald Trump promised us Mexico would pay for, not the U.S. taxpayer. So I think that he's going to hear from Republicans in Congress just politically who say, wait a second, there's no way we're going to get all of what you want, and shutting it down will really hurt our party's chances in the midterm. And I don't know if Donald Trump actually wants to shut it down.
Oh, I think he does.
Or if it's just a negotiating tactic.
When you talk about who's going to pay for it, remember the tariffs. Because this is how all of this ties together. So the tariffs are revenue coming in that then goes for the wall. Money is fungible. It's all going into the same bank. So we all knew that there was going to be a mechanism. Yes, it did. He said Mexico paid for it. The tariffs.
I have another theory.
There's many different ways of accounting for it. But I would say this, that he tried with the yummy carrots and said, here's DACA, Democrats. Would you like these yummy carrots? And then we could do this border wall thing. They said no.
And some Republicans
got
said no, too.
the big.
So what's
Would
in
you
the
like
other
these
hand besides carrots?
Swamp carrots. Would you like them?
Okay.
Swamp said no. So he pulled out the giant stick and he goes, now, Swamp, I'm going to smack you with this. And you're right. It is Republicans and Democrats. It's both sides. It's everybody who's swamp-tastic.
Well, and it's the curious point, too, is whether or not you're using that carrot and stick analogy, whether or not the president becoming tough is enough to answer back to that swamp. Because, I mean, look, you've got both chambers with Republicans saying no shutdown before.
I have a theory.
That's right.
I think President Trump is doing this because Democrats are in the minority right now. They are charged up for the midterm elections. President Trump knows that immigration is a huge base issue. What President Trump is trying to do is get the Republican base charged up, ready to go vote in the midterm elections. I think he knows that Republicans and Democrats will ultimately come together on a spending bill. And if anything, this actually pushes Democrats to want to work with Republicans more, get something done. I don't think he ultimately would veto whatever they come up with. And so I think he sort of gets his cake and eats it too, in the sense that he charges up the Republican base. Ultimately, they come together at the spending bill, get it done before the midterm elections. And I think it's a win-win.
You know what I love about what you're saying, Lisa?
Thank you.
The Democrats right now are struggling to figure out who their base is because your party is splitting.
Well,
and so it is
parts
actually advantageous for the Republicans, for the president to handle it this way.
And,
it's an interesting perspective.
The polling on the midterm shows that voters across the political spectrum, particularly independents, they think Washington can't work.
Yeah.
And Republicans are in charge of both houses and the White House. And to an independent voter who says, wait, they can't even keep the government open? I can't go to the national park?
Before we leave it, can we just one thing that has to change in this country is a broken immigration system.
Yes.
We're letting the wrong people in. There are too many illegals that come in that don't assimilate well into our culture. And there are too few good legals who do it the legal way who come in. We got to make it easier for those qualified immigrants who want to work and assimilate in this country to come in.
So the word assimilate, I have to let Marie come back on because her glasses just popped off her head.
Yeah, I just think the term good immigrants and assimilate.
It means speaking English. It means being willing to work instead of taking welfare. It means a lot of very specific things. I know a lot of immigrants. I used to cover Latin America for 12 years. I know a lot of good immigrants been trying for years, decades, to get into this country who can't because our immigration system is broken. Meanwhile, millions of illegals who are not good for the economy are coming in.
Some of those words are used not by you, but by other people in very not good terms in terms of the history of immigration in this country and
what are you talking about? Racism?
Absolutely. And
that's BS because
David,
of the fact.
let me finish, please. You just talked for 2 minutes.
I don't want to allow anybody to suggest that the words that I just uttered were racist in any way.
I said that's not what you did. I said people use those terms in the immigration debate in ways that I find deeply
There are
offensive and
crazy
un-American.
people and bad people everywhere, and what I say
Some of
won't
them
stop
are
them from being that way.
Some of them are running our immigration
That doesn't
policy
stop
right
the
now.
fact that the immigration
That's
system
unfair.
is broken
Stephen
and
Miller,
needs to be fixed.
Sure, but when you talk
the majority
about
of Americans
when you
are
talk
with
about
President Trump on immigration
when
issues
you
when it comes
talk about
to increased border
good
security,
immigrants,
hybrid
good
wall, the list
immigrants,
goes
People
on.
willing to work and assimilate into what this country is. It's that simple.
So they
It's that
give
simple.
up their
legally.
entire culture.
No,
No,
one
assimilate
said that for a
so that we
second.
don't have the kind of situation they have in Europe where people stay completely isolated in their own communities and don't assimilate into the culture. It's very simple.
The language is very charged, and we just need to be careful.
Thank you to our team in the booth for letting that breathe a little bit. I wanted to hear this.
Thank you,
because
Harris.
it feels like we talk past each other. I think it's important to kind of get there. All right, meanwhile, the president is touting his popularity among Republicans in Tampa. It happened last night. Woo! It was fiery. The president plans to wade into a hotly contested special election. The high stakes for Republicans in a race that could tell us a lot about the upcoming elections in November. Stay close, don't you move.
They just came out with a poll. Did you hear? The most popular person in the history of the Republican Party is Trump. Can you believe this? They just came out with a poll. Did you hear? The most popular person in the history of the Republican Party is Trump. Can you believe this? But to keep it going, we need to elect more Republicans. We need more votes. And we need to elect Ron DeSantis as your governor.
I love when he speaks of himself in third person. That's President Trump rallying the GOP base in Tampa last night, touting his popularity among the Republican faithful as he stumps for Congressman Ron DeSantis, who's running for governor of Florida. Trump's power to boost GOP candidates becoming evident, and now he plans to jump into Ohio's special election amid GOP concerns of a tightening race in a reliably Republican House district. The president will travel there Saturday to stump for Troy Balderson, who is battling Democrat Denny O'Connor. A loss next Tuesday could raise fears among the GOP of a Democratic blue wave come this November. David.
Ooh. Well, in Florida, nobody would agree with the president more than I think Ron DeSantis, who is doing everything. He practically has Trump tattooed on his forehead. I mean, Ron DeSantis believes that aligning himself, right, maybe on the shoulder, but it's close to the forehead. He believes that aligning himself totally with the president is the right strategy. And it's not only for him. There's a very close Senate race where Rick Scott, the former governor of Florida, is going against a tried and true Democrat who's been there for a while. Bill Nelson did have the lead. Now Rick Scott has the lead. So apparently aligning yourself with the president, as the president himself said, is not a bad strategy. Marie knows more about Ohio, but Florida, boy, it's not doing anybody any harm to ally themselves with the president.
So I would just have two things to say real quickly about Florida. Rick Scott, led the state at times like the Pulse nightclub shooting. I mean, he has been there
Parkland.
through some horrific and had leadership through those moments.
Right.
Both sides on both political aisle sides say that he did a good job in those terms. So he's got his own to bring to the table.
He does, and economically, he really helped the state. Right. They have 300,000 new entries every year because people are flocking to Florida with zero taxes.
And then real quickly, Putnam, who's also in the race against DeSantis, is somebody we had on Kelly McEnany yesterday of the RNC. I did yesterday on Outnumbered Overtime, and she said that was who she used to work for. So these are two great candidates to choose from for Republicans, but they're very different.
Well, and DeSantis is a primary, so that's, I think, Trump plays differently in
Putnam
primaries.
goes against
but in terms of this Ohio special election, this is my home district. I grew up here. For decades, it's been a Republican district. It's Pat Tiberi's old district. And the fact that they have now sent President Trump and Vice President Pence, the Republicans are pouring in national money. This race for Republicans should not be that close. Early ballots look very good for Democrats. The polls of likely voters actually have the Democrat either even or up. And so, Lisa, we were talking about this earlier. you know, this isn't a swing district. This isn't one Democrats thought they could pick up. And the fact that it's so close, I think, should be a warning sign to some Republicans. Danny O'Connor also, I would point out, the Democrat, has pledged not to support Nancy Pelosi.
So who can beat him?
He's one of these Democrats in the Midwest that has said, I'm not going to support Pelosi.
He messed up in an interview recently where he was pressed on that issue, and then he eventually said he would vote for whoever the Democrats put up, even if it's Nancy Pelosi.
If it was Nancy or a Republican.
I know, but still, that's a big slip because Republicans have been trying to tie him. But Republicans have been trying to tie him to Nancy Pelosi, so that will be used against him. But Maria's right. I am nervous about looking at some of these special elections, whether it's the PA special election with Connor Lamb pulling it out, or Arizona 8, where Debbie Lesko didn't pull it off as much as she should have.
You guys having another moment, by the way? This is the second time you've had a moment like
but I am worried because Democrats are in the minority. Republicans have seen so many members of Congress exit, leaving those open seats, which are much more difficult to win. So I do worry about if the Republican base is charged up or not, which, back to my point regarding immigration, I think is part of President Trump figuring out ways to get them excited.
And it's also why we see President Trump out there and working so hard. I heard some poor misinformed person sitting around a table on another network I won't mention.
Not here.
What show that was, saying that what the president likes to do is campaign for the job, but he doesn't like to actually do it, and he doesn't want to do the real work. Well, wait, and that's why we see him out there campaigning, is because that's the fun. Campaigning is hard and painful. He's doing it for someone else to help him have the numbers that he really needs. But this is something that is the responsibility of the person who's at the head of the party. And Lisa, you know, tell me how important that is for these candidates.
Well, I think it's important because Republicans have to do everything they can. They're going to have to work so much harder than Democrats in turning out the base for the midterm elections. One, we've got history against us. Two, Dems are in the minority, so they are charged up. So Republicans and the president have to do everything they can to get our folks to show up at the polls.
Does the GOP hold the House?
No. I don't know. I think we're going to lose a lot of seats. I don't know if we lose the House or not, but I think it's going to be tough.
Right now, we are awaiting the White House press briefing where we could hear more on the news that the president is considering raising a proposed new tariff on a $200 billion in Chinese goods from 10% to 25%. We're going to bring that to you live. Plus, Democrats in search of someone who can beat the president in 2020. The advice from Bernie Sanders, former campaign manager. He says, look to your left. Whether that's the way to go, we will debate.
Why?
As Democrats search for a candidate to take on President Trump in 2020, and some party leaders call to abolish ICE and even embrace socialism, a far-left candidate may not be out of the question. This, according to Bernie Sanders' 2016 campaign manager, Jeff Weaver, who's telling Democrats that left is the only way to turn.
I think if we're going to be successful in defeating Trump and ending this abysmal administration, we're going to have to nominate a progressive, certainly. I do think, speaking generally, that the party needs to move in a much bolder and more aggressively progressive direction.
So, Melissa, I think I still have a 2016 hangover with the Bernie Sanders team, and it's hard for me to listen to Jeff Weaver give my party advice on anything, but I'll set that aside. What he says is interesting. What do you think?
I think he might actually be right in the sense that you look at these candidates that are, you know, picking a momentum. I'm very jealous. Martha McCallum tonight on The Story is going to have, I saw an ad for it, so I hope I'm right about this, Sarah Smith. She's out in the 9th District in Washington State, and she's somebody who's in the mold of Ocasio-Cortez here in New York. She's young, she's a millennial, she's dynamic, she's somebody who came up in the shadow of Bernie Sanders. She's backed by the same national organization that gave money here in New York. And I really think that going broad in anything, whether it's television or politics, doesn't work anymore. And it's about being targeted, being specific, really firing up the people who believe in that, and that we're such a bifurcated society, set of viewers, whatever it is, that you have to pick a lane and drive hard in it. And I think they would be successful, but you could have somebody who's moderate, who had an issue and was really dynamic, It's about, you have to be on fire.
Lisa? I was going to tell Marie to get a breakfast sandwich and a coffee for the hangover.
Guys, I need it. It's still there.
After a year and a half.
But
still there.
I think you could potentially see someone like a socialist emerge in 2020, because I think that what we're going to see from Democrats,
not for president.
No, but I think you could see someone emerge from the Democratic primary, because I think you're going to have so many candidates running in 2020, because one thing that Democrats have lost, and we've seen a little bit of this election cycle, is they're not as good at maintaining their primaries. We've seen a more progressive candidates enter these primary races. They used to be really good at clearing them out, and now they're not as good. So I think you could ultimately see a bunch of Democrats running. And if you've got a bunch of people like Cory Gardner, Kamala Harris, even what's her name from New York,
Kirsten
Gillibrand, who all sort of represent the same
Elizabeth
camp,
Warren.
then you could have someone come up, just like you saw someone like President Trump, outside of the mainstream, someone that's a little bit unique. So I think you potentially could.
But economics
I'm getting shouted at on Twitter right now, because I had said, and there's a little clip obviously already, I had said, can Democrats really fire up a base coming out? It could, who is the base? And people are pointing out, well, they had record numbers in certain areas, but it's not, as Lisa's saying, it's not widespread.
Well, and there is a huge part of the Democratic Party that is still moderate, running in the Midwest, running in the South, running in the Plain States. And my party's going to have a fight in 2020 for who we want to put forward.
Yeah,
and
that's what I said.
You go back and read some of what Bill Clinton was saying the last time he was running, and a couple of years after that, talking about how the year of big government is over and everything. And you put together also, you add that, the history of the moderate wing of the Democratic Party, together with what the socialists are talking about. I think, frankly, the old Democrats are more similar to Republicans than the new Democrats are to the old Democrats.
All the parties are getting all mixed up now. We are, on that note, awaiting comment from the White House about a potential increase in tariffs on Chinese goods, all part of the president's plan to end what he calls abusive trade practices, why some are concerned about a trade war, and how this could affect consumers and businesses. Up next.
This program is brought to you.
Fox News has been closely following the search for missing University of Iowa student Molly Tibbetts. The 20-year-old was last seen jogging 2 weeks ago in a rural central Iowa town. Now Fox News is talking exclusively to her boyfriend, Dalton Jack. Here's just part of that.
Do you have any theory of what might have happened? What do you think happened?
I mean, everybody has their own theories, but I'm just kind of leaving it up to the law enforcement to try and figure that one out, and just don't want to go racking it through my brain thinking of what happened, just driving myself insane, because I know everybody else around here is, and you just got to lead by example and try to just let the law enforcement do their job.
We're going to have more from that exclusive interview and a live report from Iowa that is coming up in the next hour of Outnumbered Overtime with Harris.
And while we're awaiting the White House press briefing, we expect to hear more on news. The president is considering plans to slap a 25% tariff on $200 billion worth of Chinese goods. That's a big jump from the initial proposals for a 10% tariff. The tariffs would target food products, chemicals, steel, aluminum, and a host of consumer products. David, is this enough to force China's hand?
Well, what's forcing China's hand is that their economy is desperate right now. Their markets are smashed. I mean, they were overblown before, but they've come way down. Consumption is way down. People are eating at very minimalist levels down there, so that they're not going to be importing much goods if we try to send them there. So they are down, and we're putting our foot on their neck. I mean, that's the Trump approach, is that while they're down, we can get the concessions that their government, their communist Chinese government, has been so reluctant to give us, like forcing them to end this practice of stealing our technology as a price to pay for doing business in China.
Well, and Melissa, I know that you've been saying, this is a negotiation tactic. I agree with that. But do you think, we had President Trump have the press conference with the EU head, I think that was last week. Things move so fast these days. Yeah. But do you think, has Can President Trump point to any points on the board right now?
I think that what he can say is there were a lot of people who said that if you listen to him for a long time, he really does believe in tariffs and he believes they work, and he's trying to, wall in the whole country, both on our borders and economically. And he has now demonstrated that that's not what he's after. He has repeatedly said that what he wants is zero tariffs everywhere. He said it at the G7 and then he said it again with the EU. That's a really hard thing to do because before we were allowing them to collect on us while we weren't collecting on them. So to get them to give that up, you have to recreate leverage where others before you have given all that leverage away. So it's not an easy job to do. But the one thing we know now for sure is what his intention sincerely is.
Well, and Marie, so President Trump's gotten a lot of criticism on the tariffs and trade as of late. But if his ultimate goal is to try to get concessions on some of these deals, how else does he extract it without the tariffs?
Well, we'll see if that theory of the case turns out to be true. So far, we don't have any new trade deals. We've pulled out of some, but we don't have anything new. No points on the board, as you asked Melissa about. And you're hearing a lot of Republicans in Congress who are actually trying to take legislative action to force the president's hand on tariffs because not only do they think it's bad economic policy, they think it's bad politics. And if they have folks in these states, soybean farmers, people in the steel industry who have seen good economic news because of the tax cuts or the stock market and suddenly are hit with these tariffs that impact them. We've already seen it impacting farmers across the country. I think politically, Republicans are like, hey, man, why are you doing this right before the midterms? You're hurting our own people with these tariffs and you're not getting anything done. They're not willing to give him unlimited time to negotiate new deals.
And Harris, staying on the politics, so soybeans is, I think, North Dakota's largest export, I believe. So you look at China intentionally targeting things like soybeans to try to hurt people and President Trump in districts and states that he's done well in. So, you're talking to people every day. What are you hearing on that front?
Well, you mean just on the front of talking to lawmakers in those states,
yeah,
obviously, where they're hearing from their constituents. So the president may have thought that he had some time with his base. He still does. But that's why he threw out that $12 billion safety net, if you will. And we've got to wrap it up because we've got some breaking news coming up.
All right.